We're going to have a panel discussion now. Senator Heitkamp and Jeff Young from Evolution One. I'm going to invite them up here to join us for this panel discussion. I have not introduced Jeff yet, so I need to do that.
I'm not that tall.
Jeff is the president and CEO of Evolution One, on one of the hidden gems of the Fargo and North Dakota business environment. You know, we have many success stories. Evolution One is one of those. If you are using any organization, like we have Discovery Benefits represented here, if you're using Discovery Benefits or another administrator for some of the consumer purse side of your employee benefits, you're very likely using software from Evolution One. Evolution One is a leading provider of payment processing around healthcare with over 500 partners, 75,000 employers use their products, 9 million consumers around the country use Evolution One products, and they have 300 team members, including 100 people here in the Fargo area. Jeff has been president and CEO since 2008. Prior to that, he held major executive positions with Microsoft and was with Great Plains Software before that. So what we'd like to do today is just have an informal discussion of what you've heard today. Again, you do have those little cards on your table if you want to pass up a question. But first, if we can get started, Senator, could you comment for us on what you've heard this morning, what you're hearing from other people, both locally and in Washington, as we look forward to the implementation of the Act?
I think North Dakota, I can figure this out, maybe. There we go. I think North Dakota isn't any different than any other place in the country. People are like, okay, I'm tired of hearing about all the politics, tired of all the back and forth. It's going to get repealed. It won't get repealed. Let's vote on it 40 times. Let's do this. And no one gets you information. No one tells you what this is. No one tells you how to do it. No one tells you the context in which to think about the Affordable Care Act and what that's going to mean to small business. And it seems like every day you read about another requirement, or every day you read about another provision, and things change and nothing gets decided, and it takes away the certainty in your business. It takes away your ability to respond to customers if you're in the insurance business, because they're going to look to you. And there's a lot of insurance folks here. They're going to look to you and say, what does this mean? But yet, where's your support to answer those questions? Where's the day-to-day that happens? Now, when we expanded to Medicare Part D, there was a whole information piece that was funded. You know, it was funded through the insurance commissioners. Remember that? So if a senior needed to know what kind of coverage to get, they would call the insurance commissioner, and the insurance commissioner had a federally supported position where they would say, these are the provisions, and this is your options, and they would help the seniors work through that. I do not believe, even with this discussion today, that we have made this same opportunity available to American business. I think you're still out there, and then the president had to acknowledge that this is not a system that's ready for various employers to implement. And so that's why we see the extension of the employer mandate. But that doesn't take away all of your responsibilities. As you know, there's IRS responsibilities that go with it. There may be opportunities. There's education responsibilities that go in letting your employees know, even if you're at various levels of employees. There's reporting requirements on whether you have part-time or full-time employees. And you kind of look at all this and say, where is the step number 1, step number 2, step number 3, step number 4. This is how we do it. This is how we're going to be in compliance, because you've probably heard if you don't do those things, there's big penalties coming. And in some cases, that's true. And so my goal here, and we have a frustrating situation in Washington, D.C., which is, you know, all of the focus has been on total repeal rather than let's fix what's not going to work. Let's try and look forward and say, how are we going to fix healthcare? Because, everybody can say the Affordable Care Act is driving up healthcare costs. You saw the chart from 1999, right? Your chart. Take a look at that. The Affordable Care Act wasn't even anyone's idea back for the last decade that you look. So you go to 2009, huge increases in premium costs. And what that's meant for the middle class is that we flatten wages because employers feel like they need to provide this coverage. And I want to make one last comment, and it's from a mile high because everybody is swirling around in the Affordable Care Act. But the United States of America has decided to adopt an insurance system that has been driven since the 40s by private insurance coverage. People believe that they should get their health insurance from their employer. Or if they're small, and it's interesting because there's never been an employer mandate, but employers over the years, large and small, to be competitive with recruiting workforces, have in fact provided that coverage. But as the prices increase, they've shifted the costs of that coverage to the employee. You saw that in the Kaiser chart. So the employee is paying more of that cost. As the cost goes up. And so we have a system in America of prepay of healthcare costs, right? So what does that mean? That means that Sanford out there can build a building knowing that people who walk through the door can pay. How do people who walk through the door pay? The vast majority of them pay with insurance. And that's the big prepay for our healthcare system. Now, let's imagine that there were absolutely no one in the United States of America who bought health insurance. What kind of healthcare would we have? It'd be okay probably for seniors unless we got rid of Medicare, and for really poor people unless we got rid of Medicaid. But how would we, in fact, manage that system? And I think as we're thinking about this and as we're frustrated with all of these changes and all of these developments, I think we need to think in a broader context of how we deliver health care in the United States of America. And it's prepay through insurance. And that's what this Affordable Care Act discussion is all about. It's about the changes that are being made in how you pay. And I go back to my opening comment, which is, yes, how do you pay? How do you manage the system that we have, the system that we've had since the 40s? But let's step back and talk about higher healthcare costs and how we can innovate within the system that we have, because long-term, that's what we need to do if we're going to grow the middle class and keep our people healthier.
Great. Thanks, Senator Heitkamp. Jeff, can I ask you, you serve so many employers in one way or another. Can I ask you what you're hearing from employers and what your observations are?
Better slide over a little bit before I give this answer. So we do talk to a lot of employers. Our 500 partners are health plans, banks, software providers, third-party administrators. So we talk to a lot of individuals. I'd say the one word that sums it up is confusion. There's confusion that we're not ready for it. And I think Senator Heitkamp's right. The information that's been out there has been a little bit late in coming. You're seeing great things happen with the presentation like from Chuck and from Mike, but it's coming and they're feeling like it's late. Most employers are trying to punt their decision for a year. And so I think whoever mentioned earlier that, this isn't the big year of change, it's next year, they're right, because most employers are trying to push it off. So confusion's number one. The second thing that they're really worried about, are we ready to execute? At a local government level, at a state government level, at a national level, are we ready to do a good job? And then the third thing, which is our business partners, we've got 500 business partners who essentially haven't changed their prices in the last 10 years. These are the banks and third-party administrators who do consumer-directed benefits. Consumer-directed healthcare is one of the ways where the price of healthcare actually looks more like CPI. It's about half of the increase as other, and why would you expect it? If we gave you $1,000 and said, take care of the $1,000, you'd take care of it like it's your $1,000, because it is. If you're paying insurance and it's just somebody else's $1,000 or $2,000, you don't know it. And our partner's biggest concern far and away is that accountable care in some way takes away their ability to innovate. Because whether it's an employer who's already made the leap, or it's, banks doing health savings accounts or insurance companies doing things, their biggest thing is don't take away my ability to innovate, because I've got a few things going on that make it easier for my consumers and are cutting some of those costs down, and let accountable care be one of the pieces. And I think Senator Heitkamp set this up really well. It's not all of healthcare. It's one piece of healthcare, but make sure the whole healthcare picture allows me to continue to drive against those things.
If I can just add to that, I'm probably an anomaly within kind of my political party, because I totally disagree with what they did with health savings accounts. I totally disagree with what they did with flexible savings accounts. One of my big concerns is that we have disconnected the consumer from the cost. We do not have people making economic decisions on their health care. Because when they go to the doctor and the doctor says, well, we're going to do an MRI, and someone says, how much does that cost? They say, what do you care? Insurance is paying for it. Well, they're paying for it. We're all paying for it. And so we all need to understand that we have an obligation, number one, stay healthy and do everything that we can to make sure that we don't overuse the system. But we also have absolutely a need to connect that consumer to the cost and not think this is just insurance that's going to pay for it, so I can use as much health care as I possibly can get in a year. And to me, that's a big component of it.
Well, we have a lot of questions from the audience, and I can already tell we're not going to get to all of them. I'm going to handle one really quickly. We've got I think, two sets of questions. Some are very specific about how does this work, and some are more on a policy level. So we'll mix up a few of each. I'm going to answer one of the very specific ones very quickly. Can someone please explain how you know if your plan is grandfathered or not? Does the deductible come into play? And the short answer is that whether you're grandfathered or not depends on changes that you did make or didn't make in your plan since the law was enacted. Yes, the deductible does come into play. It has to do with how much you may have changed your benefit structure. And I would just invite you to talk to one of our representatives here. We're happy to consult with any group and help you understand grandfathering for your particular group.
Paul, did you have to ask to be grandfathered, or is it just your plan?
No, if you essentially have made no changes in your plan since the law was enacted, you are grandfathered. It isn't a designation. But there are some rules around it that would be too complicated to try to walk through right now. We'd be happy to advise you on that if you don't know if you're grandfathered. Let me ask both panelists a general policy question that came from the audience. Is the long-term outcome of healthcare reform or coverage for all better for the economy or bad for the economy? Senator, would you like to?
I think that an escalating healthcare cost in this country is bad for the economy. Now, do I think that the Affordable Care Act is going to reduce costs? Not in the short term in any way, shape, or form do I think it's going to reduce costs. Why is that? Because you're going to bring a lot of new users into the system. There may be a lot of use in the beginning of the system. Now, Massachusetts will tell you you'll bend that curve over long term, and I don't know what Kaiser's information looks like, but I think that the hurt is in the beginning. And the question is, can we in fact innovate, as Jeff has said, can we in fact look towards those things that will bend the curve even more going forward? But to me, the economic question isn't about the Affordable Care Act. It's about the high cost of healthcare in this country growing as a percentage of GDP, and we can't afford it. And long term, that's going to dramatically affect our competitiveness in the worldwide market, and it really affects what we can do in this country. And so we've got to figure this out. I think the Affordable Care Act is a way to get people out of the emergency rooms and into maybe a health home. That could be positive, but I think there's going to be a lot of discussion about cost curves in the very beginning.
Yeah, and maybe rather than to go back on the direct piece, I think the technology innovation is a huge piece of that. I mean, if you think about what's hard, I mean, healthcare is not just expensive; it's hard. and it's getting harder to understand every year. If you think about legislation and regulation and even the presentations you saw today, it's really complex. And so, I mean, I do think the technology is a big piece of that. How do we make it simpler? And you know, we've invested a lot in mobile devices in the last 3 years. And how can you walk around with your smartphone, which everybody has? You know, last 2 years, smartphones have outsold PCs. You can walk around and say, who's the provider I need to touch to? Where can I get my prescription filled? And then what's it cost at different places? And then you can handle it. I mean, my favorite application on my smartphone right now is, you know, after you get done getting your prescription filled, I can take a picture of my receipt and it's done. It's gone. I mean, it's taken care of. I don't have to file a claim. I don't have to understand it. And it's taken care of for me. And the insurance guys who are really smart, the hospital guys, the providers are all going to take care of that. But all I had to know is I walked into a pharmacy, you know, I took a picture of a receipt and I was able to take care of it. And so, you know, mobile devices and making healthcare simpler and then applying technology in the right way, you know, I think that's a big part of how do you get more people covered. You know, some of it are all the things the senators provided. Some of it is how does the technology get easier.
Yeah, and just to a point on technology, if you talk to a lot of providers, particularly doctors, going to electronic medical records is their biggest complaint, because they spend all of their time sitting in front of their computer terminal typing in before they even turn and look at the patient. And my husband, who's a family physician, you know, if you ask him what his biggest gripe is, he said he didn't go to school for 8 years to be a typist.
Great. Let's turn to another very specific question, and there are some questions here that are so specific we're probably not going to be able to answer them in front of the group because it would affect individual groups. But we'd be happy to get you those answers, and we'll look at ways we can communicate. Here's a fairly simple question that says, "Please explain how private exchanges work." Okay, so I'll answer that one very quickly. First of all, we know that there's a government-sponsored exchange. In North Dakota, it is the federal government is running the exchange for individuals and small business. However, some larger businesses are requesting the use of private exchanges, which are being sponsored by various private companies that can offer choices among health plans for the individual employees within an employer that does offer health insurance coverage for their employees. These are being set up by benefit consulting firms, in some cases by insurance companies. For example, we have the option available for our larger employers that we can offer multiple choices of Blue Cross products in a private exchange-like environment. So there are a number of those available. That's not covered under the Affordable Care Act. This is just something that's happening in the marketplace on its own, regardless of this law. But those options are growing. We are seeing that as a trend around the country.
Paul, I have a question on that. What about small employers, which we have a lot of them here, who may want to do private exchanges where it gives their employees a lot of choices? Is there a way for them to co-op with larger employers or to get into a private exchange?
You know, and I might ask Jeff to comment on this. I do think that there is a movement, and there's good news, bad news here. There is a movement among larger employers to go to more of a defined contribution approach on healthcare, to say this is how much I can afford to spend, and I just want a vehicle then to give my employees choice to spend what I can afford towards health insurance coverage. Right now, I haven't seen a lot of options that apply to small business. I would not be surprised that they're coming, though.
I think that might be a great innovation like Jeff's talking about, which is, you know, so here it is, this is what it is, you go out and buy the insurance that you want rather than us creating a group for you.
Jeff,
Right.
Your perspective on that?
Well, there'll be probably as many private exchanges launched on October 1st as there are public exchanges. You know, a lot of organizations are rushing out to get their private exchanges in place at the same time, not necessarily to compete, but to be an alternative. And most of those are medium and large businesses, but some of them are focused on the small business space. And it's going to give the same kind of buying. You know, the other thing that I think is important is a lot of times when people talk about private exchanges, it ends up being synonymous with defined contribution. And that's something that if you haven't heard before, you're you're going to hear more about it. And that's where, you're giving each employee a contribution, a defined type. Here's your money, and you can go out and buy your benefit. And you can pick from a variety of plans. And that's another thing that's becoming very popular. And I'll tell you, I sat with one of the, biggest 10 banks in the country in January with their HR leader, and they had their 2 top-ranking officials with them, and they got halfway through the meeting and they said, hey, this is confidential. I haven't even told my team, but we're moving to a defined contribution plan in 2015. And they'd studied high deductible plans for a period of years. They were on a very traditional insurance plan. They had thought about going to a high deductible plan, and they were going to jump all the way to a defined contribution and just say, here's how many dollars we're going to give. We know we can gauge the change per year and how much that goes up, and it becomes a very manageable expense for us. But you're going to see a lot about defined contributions tied to private exchanges.
I would like to, because it's great that we're getting so many questions, but I just know we're not going to be able to get through all of them. And because you didn't put your name on the cards, which we didn't ask you to do that, what I would like to do is I'm going to impose a higher workload on Mike Potts. This is sort of what I do. I create work for other people. Mike, I'm going to give you, Mike is so happy to have that. We would like to be able to help you walk through these questions on a specific basis for your company. And also, we'll think about how we can post some answers to your questions on our website as well, so that people beyond those in the room can get answers. But for your specific questions, here's Mike's email address. And I'm not going to give you his phone number because he can probably respond better and order if you email. So it's mike.potts, Potts, at BCBSND.com. So if you didn't get your question answered here, please drop Mike an email. We'll make sure we get back some information to you. Senator, I have a somewhat political question here, but I think it's on a lot of people's minds, so I'd like to ask you this. If the ACA is so beneficial for Americans, why are the leaders who voted for it and their staffs exempted from it? I know there's been an issue about congressional staff coverage lately, and I think that's the question that's being asked.
I don't know why you think that we're exempted from it. We get insurance like everyone else, and the staff gets insurance that's provided with an employer, and the federal government's run kind of this massive private exchange for a lot of years. If you want to look at what a private exchange looks like, take a look at the federal government insurance options. And I know that you'll hear that the congressional staff's exempt from Social Security. That's not true. That we're exempt from taxes, or we hear this all the time that these rules don't apply, and certainly that's not true. Obviously, the federal government is going to continue to provide health insurance. We for a lot of years. I'm not going to get into that, but I do want to talk about defined benefit, because a lot of you are sitting there saying, what does that mean? That means that the employer knows that there's a risk long-term to taking on the risk of increased healthcare costs. How you've managed that risk in the past is you have shifted, as you saw in the chart, you shifted that cost more and more to the employee by saying we aren't going to provide in family coverage, we aren't going to provide this kind of coverage, dental and eye care coverage go away. So there's been modifications to shift that risk. When we talk about a defined benefit, it is a way for employers to do shift risk movement. And what do I mean by that? I mean now the cost of increasing healthcare, because you've got a flat sum to spend, gets shifted to the employee. This is not unusual. We're doing it in pensions, have already done it in pensions. The days of the defined benefit pension plan, which is you retire, you get a pension, it comes every month, and here it is. Those are gone. I think I'm going to be probably the last group that has a defined benefit plan, because now we see defined contributions, right? And why did employers do that? Because the pension costs were too risky For years, we weren't funding pensions because the stock market was going up and you were able to do it with growth in the portfolio. And that came crashing to a halt, and they realized this is not the way to provide predictability for my business. And so, this is all risk shifting to the individuals. And the more we do this, the more attention we have to pay to the cost of healthcare, or people won't be able to afford it, even with all of this regulation. The bottom line is we need to focus on healthcare costs and what's going to bring them down.
Now, we want to be respectful of everybody's time here. We would be happy to stick around. A number of us would be happy to stick around and answer questions. We are a little bit past our scheduled time. And so, first of all, I would like to ask Senator Heitkamp to close off with a closing comment. But also I want to thank Jeff Young and Senator Heitkamp's office for suggesting this forum. We were happy to host it. We're happy to participate, but it was really their idea, and we think it's been very beneficial. I hope that you felt it was beneficial as well. And Senator, would you like to close this out?
Just that I get it. I get that you're sitting there going, what is this? What do you want me to do? And why do I need to hire 5 consultants to do it? What's my administrative costs of doing this? And why aren't they helping us do it if it's such a good idea? I think that is a completely legitimate gripe about all of this. And we're seeing it over and over again. I think the administration was way too slow to respond to the challenges for businesses. I think that they thought magically somehow this would spring into action. Everybody would know. I think that was a huge part of being naive. I think we're fortunate in North Dakota. We've got groups like this who are trying to help us work through it. But my commitment to you is to try and get as much information that I can to businesses. Now, we recently, and I'm also on the Small Business Committee. I'm also on the Small Business Committee. And we recently had a hearing just like this. What can we do with small businesses to get the information out there? What more needs to be done? What are the problems? And we spent the better part of that hearing, talking about total repeal, talking about, how just all the politics of the healthcare reform. And I walked away going, no wonder the American public doesn't trust us. No wonder the American public is so frustrated, because whether you're on, I hate Obamacare, I want it repealed, or I think that this thing could work and it could be beneficial, no matter where you are on the spectrum, we have a law that's on the books that needs to be implemented. And the job of the people who pass this law, which includes Congress, and the people who are charged with implementing, is to get information out at a very minimum. And I think we have failed miserably. And so you have my continuing commitment. And what I'd like to do is put it in context. Here's the deadlines, but here's the various kind of silos that you need to be thinking about. And how do you evaluate? What are the tools for evaluation of what's the best decision for your business? And I would really encourage you, I guess, at this point, as you think about this, to hesitate before you go to the kind of knee jerk of I'm going to just have part-time employees. In North Dakota, it's kind of hard to do that because we're in a labor shortage market. You have to go out and compete for folks, and so you're in a little bit of a different situation because you may not have the flexibility of doing that. But I think that threat's real, and a lot of people will say no, it's not. I think that, and this will be my last comment, that I am very much looking forward to the exchanges and seeing what the exchanges provide. There has been a lot of discussion about whether that's going to increase costs, whether what we're going to see on the exchanges for various levels of coverage and what those cost points will be. I think that will be kind of the first jumping off point for us to really understand whether this system's going to work or not work. And so I guess it's stay tuned. We're going to be engaged in this on a regular basis. Hopefully we'll get some additional information up on the Senate web page that will provide you with some information to navigate it, both on public policy, because I know you're interested in that part, but for those of you who are the human relations folks, those of you who do human resources, who just want the information and don't want to spend your nights reading web pages trying to figure out what's going on and then not know if the answer's right. You've got a lot of resources and a lot of ability to ask questions. Please send those questions to us. If it's in my office or Hoven's office, or send the questions to the folks you heard today, and we'll get you answers as you navigate this very, very new and to some degree muddy and murky water. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator, and thank you, Jeff, and thank you for everyone who is here today. We know this is a topic that's very important to you. We hope this was valuable to you, and we look forward to helping you answer more questions as we go forward. Thanks to all the panelists who are here.